The broadcast is now starting.
Well, hello everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the next episode of the PixelMill Webinar Series and today's offering of Top 10 Blockchain Questions Answered. As always, I'm your host, Michael Wells. I'm the Partnerships and Community Manager here at PixelMill. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We're so happy to have you. We hope we'll have you coming back every time we have a session. For those of you who have been here before, thank you so much for supporting us. Thank you for coming back. Today, I'm really hyped about this session. Little joke there for you, you'll find out about later. This is going to be a really fun one today, guys. This isn't necessarily sort of our normal thing, but you're going to find out how it kind of ties into our normal SharePoint, Office 365 kind of look at the world, right? Just a couple quick things. If you do have questions at any time throughout the session, there is a questions tab. Make sure you put your questions and comments there. I'll be keeping track of those, and you'll see my face pop back up whenever a question comes in. If you are more social media minded, you can also use the hashtag PixelMill Webinars or tag at PixelMill team with your questions, and I will check those out as well. I'll make sure those get answered. If at some point we don't get to your questions, we do always save a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. So, just don't be worried if we don't get to your questions right away. We will get to them at some point, I promise. Without further ado, I've been talking way too much. Let me introduce our speakers today. We've got two speakers for you today, one on my left, one on my right, the amazing Christian Buckley and Eric Overfield. Take it away, guys.
Hey, all right. Thank you all for joining us. As Michael said, this is a little off our beaten path of the Office 365 SharePoint space, but it's a topic that I've been really passionate about. Christian, too, we've been talking a lot about this. I know you are as well, so I really appreciate you joining us.
No, it's great to be here, and I think you're right. In fact, I love this topic as we've talked about this for I think over a year.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And what's happening for a while, but is I think a lot of those questions that I had that we've talked about is what is the enterprise application of blockchain? So I'm excited to get in and talk about some of those scenarios, some of the potential, and where things are today.
Exactly. What is this whole thing we're talking about? Okay, let's get some intros out of the way here. Who are you?
Sure, yeah, and for those that don't know me, my name is Christian Buckley. I am the founder and CEO of CollabTalk, and CollabTalk is an independent research and technical marketing services company. I've been an MVP in Office servers and services since January 2012. I've been in the SharePoint world officially since 2005 and was at Microsoft for 3.5 years. Was part of the team that helped launch off what is now Office 365 early on, and been out for almost a decade in the ISV and SI world out in the Microsoft ecosystem. But I'm also the chief marketing officer for a company called Reveal It, Reveal.io, a new website launching here the next week. But if you wait for that, but is an AI and blockchain technology company. So I'm very much in the midst of this process and learning about like the ICO process, because we're in our pre-ICO right now. So it's very interesting. So making a lot of connections with other startups in the space that are blockchain related and learning about that, but still very much involved in collaboration, information management. So as I put on the bio there, you can see I got to share a picture of my old IBM books, which is exciting. So I
saw that. That's awesome.
I'm co-author of, I participated in 3 books on the SharePoint world, and then prior to my Microsoft experience, I did 3 books in the IBM Rational. It was really, I got involved with Rational Software before they got acquired by IBM. So Rational bought my company. Rational was then bought by IBM. It's funny, my last book in that space on ClearQuest, that one, the image, went live the month that I started at Microsoft. So they wanted me to promote, and I'm like, nope, sorry. Yeah, so I'm glad to be here and been friends with Eric for a long time, and happy to participate in yet another PixelMill webinar.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for joining us. You're a soon-to-be truly minted Microsoft Regional Director too. In what, 3 days?
That's right.
Right on. Yeah, that was definitely a good acquisition to the group. So
thank you very much.
Definitely glad to have you. My name is Eric Overfield. A lot of you do know me. I appreciate it. For those of you who don't, I'm president, co-founder of PixelMill, regional director as well. Microsoft MVP, basically same exact space that Christian's in. Although I've been primarily in the Office 365 SharePoint space, I've been really interested in blockchain because of my geek side. I mean, that's just where it comes down to it. When I first learned about it and I heard about this whole Bitcoin thing, I was with everyone else, like, this is a joke, whatever. When I finally got into like the tech to figure out what does this whole mining thing have to do, and I looked at the algorithms behind it, my geek just went, this is cool, I want a part of this. And so it's something that I see long-term potential for. Right now, I'm not focusing a lot of true development time in it just because it is pretty complex. I'm letting a lot of other people worry about the nitty-gritty. But as a general topic and as the theory behind it, oh yeah, I'm trying to absorb any information I can because I do think it's really, really cool.
Yep.
Quickly about who PixelMill is, though, for those of you new to joining us as well, we're a digital agency based out of California. And our space is the Office 365, SharePoint, and Azure space. We're providing communication and collaboration portals and solutions for our customers. So if you are looking to utilize Office 365 and Microsoft Teams and Planner and all the cool stuff, and then you want to use Graph and make it all work together, definitely we're your best bet there, and we'll take care of you. Okay, let's just get right into it, though. We've used up enough time. When Christian and I were discussing this topic just before this, we were saying that we could probably spend an hour on just like 2 questions. We've got 10 hot questions that I think are really cool. We had to narrow it down from a much larger group of questions. But we need to start off with the 101, which is just to level set everybody. What is blockchain? So Christian, could you give me like a quick 30-second review, and I might then kind of fill in some gaps or something?
Yeah, I mean, and you've heard the terminology, and I think we'll get in and talk about what each of those things means. But it's a database technology that it's all encrypted, but it's on a transparent ledger. So it's a shared, distributed ledger, so that as people modify it, that it's agreed upon, that it is then it's visible, it's transparent, and then it can't be changed. And because it's distributed, so it does use cryptography to secure that information and the transfer of those things. It has, and I'm sure we'll get into, Eric, around proof of work and consensus about the changes that are made. So when people that are part of the blockchain agree on the change of that block, it's then locked. It becomes immutable. It's like it can't be changed. It also can't be hacked. I mean, because you can only hack like a single node. If it's distributed, then you have all of these other hundreds or thousands of locations that have that same information to repair that, to identify, hey, that one node has been hacked. Mm-hmm. So it's that decentralized aspect provides that security, and there's no central point of failure, like a database going down or the connection to our server being lost or whatever it is. So when and we'll get into this a little bit as well, but when you're working in lower trust scenarios where you need to share information, it provides that transparency and provides, through those mechanisms, high trust to be able to get work done. Yeah. Probably not the best description. I know there's a lot of shorter ones that are out there, but we're going to talk about each of those things. Yeah, it effectively comes down to, it's a distributed ledger. It's a distributed list of events that have occurred that's immutable on a peer-to-peer network that's untrusted. So everyone doesn't trust each other, and the trust comes within the security protocol and the methodology that everyone's agreed to, a protocol that everyone says, okay, hey, here's how we're going to do this, and everyone agrees to it. And because it's secure by encryption, it basically is like, okay, yeah, this becomes a better system than if any one entity that you might trust, say a bank or the government or something, they say, oh, you can trust us, but they're central authority. Yeah, but if they got hacked for any reason, or if there was a nefarious person, it'd be easy to take down that one system. Whereas with blockchain, it's a distributed ledger, and the protocol allows that ledger to become basically secure. And of course, the first blockchain, the first thing that implemented blockchain was really Bitcoin. So most of the real cryptocurrencies that we all hear about nowadays, they're all based on some sort of blockchain as well. So they are very related, for sure, but cryptocurrencies are one implementation on top of blockchain. And we're going to spend most of our time really looking at other types of blockchain that I think are much more entertaining. Well, and Eric, one of the ways that I described this, again, it kind of helped make sense in my mind. In fact, I had a conversation. I was we were at the European SharePoint conference happening in Dublin, Ireland last fall. I was having a conversation with one of the speakers there that did a session that blockchain. Sorry, the name just escaped me. If you remember who was presenting on blockchain there, Eric, by chance? Anyway.
I went to that session and it was pretty cool, but I don't remember who it was.
Yeah.
I think
So
it was
apologies.
Denmark or Belgium or Netherlands or something like that.
Yeah, but part of it is, so I asked the question, and I said, look, I'm trying to understand, like, what am I missing here from this? Back in 2001, I got involved with a startup, a company called E2Open, and part of what we went and did was we worked with these high-tech manufacturing companies that wanted to have real-time collaboration with their partners, and they needed to build a dedicated cloud-based dedicated network around their ecosystem and have their partners come in. And part of what we did is they needed to be able to securely send highly sensitive intellectual property, know that it was received, so having acknowledgments, transferred in between each of these handoffs of information, make edits, collaborate on something, lock it down, get consensus around that, push it back out. And we were moving from like the old supply chain communication model of using EDI. So it was very expensive. You're paying for every time you connect and transfer information, pay hundreds of dollars for each of those transactions. So it got to be very expensive. And we were using, HTTPS, so secure in that standpoint, but building these trusted networks. The problem with that model that we knew then was that the true efficiencies happened when you had an open network where it wasn't one company, one OEM building a product with each of their partners, but that they would benefit when there were other OEMs that were part of this network. Obviously, you couldn't do that because it was secure. It was IP being passed. It had to be this closed circuit. But if the transport itself were secure, that there were benefits because their tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers, partners, were also suppliers and partners with these other OEMs. So the efficiencies happened when people could move freely between them, but it had to be done in a secure way. And there just wasn't trust, and there were a lot of problems with technology around that. Blockchain has the ability then to open that up and to achieve what we were working on back in 2001, 2002, and 3. And that is exciting for me. So that is in my mind, thinking about, supply chain, manufacturing technology, and the benefits of having this distributed, but also trusted and immutable ledger to track that behavior. But because of the security level, because of the encryption between that, you could have competitors side by side in that network, and it will not be able to see what's happening in the interactions, but if they're not supposed to see those transactions. Anyway, just the way that I think about that.
Which gets us really into that good second question, which is like, I don't get it. Like, what are reasonable blockchain use cases? So I think you sort of gave some good examples there, and let me kind of camp on that and give a few more.
Sure.
There's one thing I do want to talk about blockchain first, which is the idea of that you have public blockchains, things like that you probably heard of as Bitcoin and Ethereum and EOS and Ripple, and there's a whole bunch of them out there, thousands, literally over 1,000, but they all have sort of different use cases. A lot of them are probably fake and not real and whatnot, but a lot of them are public. That means anybody can really post to them and anybody can add to the ledger, anybody can pull data off the ledger. But there's also use cases for private blockchain where you're still using the distributed network, but you're not actually making it public. Not everybody can go read everything on that blockchain. So a simple use case for me, this is the one that really has sold it, where my wife is from Sweden and she has money in Sweden. Well, let's say someone gives us some money in Sweden for a gift and we want to get it from the Swedish krona to the US dollar. Well, if we go through a banking system to have it transfer here, it could take days, it could be very expensive, we lose a lot of money in transaction fees, etc. And it takes a long time. Well, blockchain through cryptocurrency would allow us to effectively take those chrono, turn them into something like Bitcoin, turn them into something something like Litecoin, who cares? And we can easily and quickly transfer it over to the US to an account maybe I have, and it's not even transferring it to the US, it'd be transferring it to an account that I control. And through this network, we can get this transferred pretty safely and securely in a matter of either minutes or sometimes little hours with very minimal fees. And like, this is huge if you think about a lot of the developing world, or where a traditional banking system is out of people's hands, or there's currencies that are not very stable. Fiat government-backed currencies are not stable, and blockchain does enable those use cases. But let's take another one, which is where banks just want to communicate with each other. And the US banking system is a great example, very archaic, very old, and we have a very bad system of communicating, and there's some real delays that can be very expensive. Well, a private blockchain can help enable scenarios where the banks can have a private ledger that is distributed across everybody, that is secured within the different transactions, because Bank A doesn't want to know what Bank B might be doing, or Bank B doesn't want to know, they don't want anyone else to know what they're doing, but they do need to be able to communicate with each other through this public ledger. And there's some definitely fascinating use cases there. And from there's hundreds of other ideas that can get pretty out there. But one that I like as well that could be simple is through something called smart contracts. So when blockchain V1 came out, it was basically Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Well, blockchain V2 is traditionally considered something like Ethereum. And the idea of Ethereum, and I have a whole different issue on what's a currency and what's not a currency, but Ethereum, their big idea was, instead of just having like a currency transaction, a monetary transaction between say Christian and I, you could add like a little bit of a programming language, so that when I say I want to do something with Christian, we can execute what's called a smart contract, where when an event occurs, something else will occur. It has to be done. Everybody on the network, again, who doesn't trust each other through the protocol, they do trust each other. So that if the classic example there would be something like the music industry, where if Christian had some book that he sold through blockchain, that could be executed in a smart contract, so that when someone purchased that, the smart contract would verify the money got from the person who bought it back into the system. Then through the system, the money was properly distributed to the different people, and it was all open in a sense, so that people could actually see that all of this did in fact occur. And it's immutable. It can't be changed. You can't go and cheat the whole system. There are lots and lots and lots of use cases. I'm sure we can come up with probably 3 hours worth of more use cases.
The one that I like, Eric, and I just thought of something else too, just based on what you said, is that, so I have a background in telecom, worked for Pacific Bell, Pacific Telsis shared services years back, and a couple other companies that were in that space, and understanding, like, if you were trying to do an international call, I mean, it's just amazing now that you can hop on and do direct phone calls using telecom service, or any number of apps. Like, it's always amazing. Like, I could have a crystal clear phone call through an app, through the cheap Wi-Fi at an international airport, and pay nothing, or I'm paying for my phone service back in the US. But there was a problem for a long time in that if you're making a phone call internationally and it was going through switching through a number of different networks to do that, each would then have this black box of attaching fees and other things on there, these switching costs. The reality is it cost next to nothing to actually do that. They were bilking customers, especially these international callers, to help pay for their other network, their overhead costs, and those kinds of things. But so using that as an example, essentially what blockchain does is it looks at where those kinds of examples still exist. I would argue that in the advertising space, we have all these intermediaries, these handoffs between these various players, that the people that own the website that you're trying to advertise on, or the video that you want to attach an ad to, whatever it is, and the consumer, they're getting bilked because they have no visibility into what handoffs, who's involved, who's taking that. So where you're, as an advertiser, paying for $100 to advertise in this location, where it might actually only cost $10, and yet $90 is eaten up in all these hidden costs, these things that are out there. By making it transparent and allowing the advertiser to work directly with the content owner, maybe it still costs $100 because it's worth that. That's the value there. But the dollars are now going into the hands of those that own those things rather than into the intermediaries. And that's the potential of through blockchain building trust within that network.
Which kind of gets me into this third question, and I'm going to relate what you just said with this question of, well, this all just seems like a fad. I mean, should I really care? I keep hearing all this buzz and hype, like, this is blockchain is going to change the world. There's a really good book I actually like. I just all of a sudden blanked on the title of it, sad as that is to say. And basically every problem ever conceived, well, blockchain's the answer, which of course is hype. What you were just talking about, though,
I thought SharePoint was the answer to everything.
Exactly. You were talking about how that there's this transparency, and of course, I think that there's going to be a lot of institutional players who are not going to like this at all, and they're going to cause a lot of resistance. And I think we're seeing some of that. So we're seeing like a lot of hype, blockchain's going to change the world. And we've seen other things that got hyped. I mean, the internet was going to change the world in '95, and it arguably has, but it went through a hype phase. We had the dot-com boom, et cetera, and the bust, of course. And I think that's the same thing that we're seeing here with blockchain. So anyone who saw the whole Bitcoin run up back in December of 2017, where it went to 20,000 a coin, and now it's hovering somewhere in the 5,000 or 6,000. I mean, that's just sort of like the tulip bulb craze. People love talking about that they're 1600s, tulip bulbs are all the craze in Europe, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. But the thing is we still buy tulip bulbs today. They're just, 1/millionth what they would have been at the height. I'm thinking the same thing here with blockchain is there is a lot of huge promise here. There's a lot of opportunity here, and I think that there is definitely a lot of hype. But at the same time, I think over the next 3, 5, 10 years, we're going to start to see some really sophisticated solutions built. We're going to see the next Airbnb. We're going to see the next advertising conglomerate who will start from scratch, and they're going to rebuild the new Facebook, the new Google, based on this technology. And of course, the institutional players, they're not going to be the engine of change. Why would they? Why would they break their model where they were able to cheat people out all the money? Which then gets me to the second little piece, which is about fees. And I was challenged. I wrote a blog post on this recently. I was challenged, well, is blockchain really going to do anything? And the guy that was challenging me, he knows blockchain far better than I do. He built a lot of sophisticated stuff. And what we were able to come down to, of course, the cryptocurrency, I think it actually can work well. But the second one is it kind of comes down to fees. It comes down to like who's going to get the fee. So advertising, if you have any kind of transaction that occurs, or let's say I want to have a distributed database between 20 people that I trust, I could go to Azure, I could get Cosmos DB, I could have a global, basically 100% reliable database that would be redundant across all these different nodes and regions, and it will work really well, and I'm paying Microsoft for that. Well, we can now get a lot of those features where we might be able to get this distributed database, a distributed operating system through a system like EOS, let's say, and but someone's going to still get the fees to run that network, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see how blockchain evolves, and it's going to come down to money. It's going to come down to who's going to get to run the computer system that we're all going to be using, but it's going to be powered by the premise of blockchain, and I think that's what to me just makes it fascinating.
Agree, and I think to answer that, the people that say, hey, it's just fad, it's just what is it's just this new thing where to go and sinkhole for money around there. It's like, no, there are some differences here. Yes, I think that the major thing that's happening now is that we're looking at what needs to happen for this to be enterprise ready. Yeah. And so a lot of that work, that foundational work, is being done. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, like it's things that indicate it's not a fad. One, it is secure. It uses cryptography, the proof of work. It uses the consensus protocols so that it's confirmed that this transaction is happening. Mm-hmm. It's decentralized, which means that there's that no central point of failure. Mm-hmm. It removes a lot of the risk of the fear of data corruption, of external hacking, of internal tampering. And if that happens, if they're able to get through that, it's only to a single node. They can't get to the whole system. Mm-hmm. and break that. It's immutable. Well, so
they can, but it would be really hard.
Right, and it's getting harder all the time.
Exactly.
For that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work that's being done around each of these areas, but it's immutable, meaning that once a block of data is written and accepted by more than 50% of the network, you can't change it. Yeah. So it's in there. Like we have to agree on that. It is transparent. So it's because it's distributed. Everybody can see it. If something is off, people can speak up to that. Yeah. There are no certification authorities. So there's blockchain. It is the authority for that. So it reduces that. And then that's that removal of intermediaries, which is so important around those hidden fees, the other things that are out there. And I know, Eric, and we talked a little bit about this, but I mean, some of the big myths that are out there of, people say, well, it's like, well, I've seen these huge in the news, these failures, these con artists going out and scamming.
Well, let's look at those.
I mean, I like anything. I mean, you have to go and do research on where you're making an investment around that. But I'd say just in general, you'd have to be pretty stupid to go and focus on blockchain trying to scam that because of these inherent benefits, the security, the transparency there. And so I know that a lot of people claim, well, hey, blockchain it's near impossible to hack. It's not impossible, it's near impossible. Yeah. But what it is, it's record compared to fiat currency.
Yeah.
Much stronger. Yeah.
I think so.
In its young life. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you shared with some of these charts with me and stuff, and like, what would you want to really make people like? What do you really want our audience to take away from these charts? Yeah, well, some of this is like, it looks fatty to me. Like, it is a fad. It's these big hype kind of things. And so if I invest in the next ICO, am I going to get a 165,000% return? It's not 165.
Well, but there's a primary difference though in some of those. And I thought it was interesting to show this. And look, there is some hype that's around these individually. Sure. But what's interesting is you see what's the reality that's happening with ICOs, which is initial coin offering. So it's a way for these blockchain-based technology companies to go and raise funds. But there, you can see the differences over on the left. So this is something like, and reveal it as we talk with investors and partners around this, we talk heavily about these differences because we have to educate people. It's not like, hey, I want to go in and buy shares, or I want to invest money and over time see it here. These are the ICOs, and the token sales are done with people that believe in that solution and want to participate within that. Yeah. And so we're not going to get into like the difference with with like utility tokens and that aspect of it, but there is so you're buying, you are investing in the ability to use that platform. I always liken it. It's closer to like a Kickstarter. Yeah. That you're helping fund the creation of this thing that you then want to use. And by ownership within that, and there is value in ownership of those tokens, but I will then use those to inside of that network, inside of that solution. But there is value. As more people want to use that solution, I may have bought those coins at $1 a piece, and over the next year, more and more people want in, so where the value of those coins becomes $5. And I say, well, I still only need, 5 credits in there to be able to do what I need to do in the system. So I might sell 4 of my other coins and make some profit on that, but then still be in there from a utility standpoint. But if you look at some of the differences of traditional venture capital versus this digital capital and what's happening, ownership, voting rights, liquidity. I mean, there are huge benefits on the ICO perspective just from, again, we could talk for an hour just on the investment aspect of what's enabled here. And the next slide, I think we've got a couple more slides that help illustrate this point of what's happening. So here, for example, you have ICO funding is outpacing by a long shot what's happening with traditional venture capital. And because it is, I mean, like huge numbers, and it surpassed venture capital investment for the first time last year, and it's just going up and up and up. And while there are, rightly so, there are restrictions in the US, there's a lot, the US government is doing its homework, trying to understand the definitions around tokens and utility tokens, and is this commerce? Is this like a traditional investment, or is this the utility aspect, the ownership of that that service, the participation within that? Those things need to be worked out. That is like state of Wyoming, Colorado. I know Nevada's doing some things. There's a number of states which are going in and trying to put a stake in the ground around the definitions of these things to try and open it up. U.S. government is in a very real position of going too slow, and then having these businesses that see this as a great way to go and get not just the investment dollars needed to build out the solutions, but then by those investors are that first round of customers, of participants within their network, of using the blockchain, which is different from the venture capitalists. What VC is investing because they actually want to use that technology? No, they want the 10x return, around that, versus the ICO, where you have smaller players that are investing, and there's a lot of restrictions still in the US around that. But around the world, there's other Korea, Australia, Puerto Rico, where there aren't those barriers to investment. And so you have, people that are not millionaires and billionaires that are able to go in and invest and buy, spend $500, $5,000 and invest in solutions that they believe in and help funding or kickstarting these solutions. So it's an exciting space just to watch as an observer.
And standard U.S. Liability issues, we're not saying anyone should go invest. And sometimes I say gamble in this stuff too. I mean, it's highly risky, highly speculative. I do believe there's still a lot of scams out there. You got to do your homework. You're hearing Christian and I both talk about companies and different tokens and stuff. That is not saying you should buy any of them. Full disclosure, I do own some of these tokens that I've talked about, and other ones I won't talk about. So, but don't go buying coin because we've talked about it. Do your homework, please. I think the ICOs are definitely very interesting. I've invested in some, shall we say, because I believed in the idea, and that's what Christian's talking about. That's what I'm hearing. That I've got this opportunity to participate in something that I think is cool, that I think is going to change the world, and I want to be a part of that. I think I'm going to make money on it, but if I lose it all, I've been saying to people, I think 90%, 95% of coins today won't be here in a couple of years. I do think there's a lot of pets.com kind of stuff. But like, let's take pets.com. Well, there are now new companies online that do sell pet food, and they're doing very well. It's just the webvan.com and stuff, the original initial people, they're paving the way for the rest of us, and they're not going to survive. So.
Well, that's why I would say that, and same here. Have some investments in that I've only invested in those that I have personal interest in utilizing that and believe it. So that's my approach to those things.
But please, anyone listening, do your due diligence. We're not telling you to go buy anything. Do it on your own. Okay, so moving on. Interest in time. The next big question I always get are all these blockchains that are out there, are they all the same?
No, they're not. All right, what's the next one?
That's an easy question. And I'm going to kind of go through there's three general versions that I kind of hear about that I see. Most of the blockchains that we're hearing about are cryptocurrencies. They're really designed around transferring a financial currency, money, between person A and person B, or some combination thereof. There's another version that came out, V2, I talked about, really was spearheaded by Ethereum, that is enabled by smart contracts. And then there's an arguably V3, there's arguably V4, but I think that there's a solid V3, which goes beyond smart contracts, and they are building something called dApps, or dApps. Let's just kind of stick with dApps instead of like email shouldn't be called email. dApps should be called dApps, distributed applications, which I think are really fascinating. And these blockchains are all having to do this, doing different ways. They use different sort of consensus algorithms, or using different protocols to determine who gets to add the next block on the chain. How does the next transaction get added? Different blockchains have different speed at which they can have another transaction, another block added to the chain, as well as how big that block can be. So there are some blockchains that are really good for currency. There's some that are really good for using more like private ledgers and whatnot. And so definitely they are all very different. If you were looking at one, you need to go read the white paper on it and try to understand what is it that they're trying to do, if you have any interest in that. And you should not get involved with something you don't understand, please.
And there are some blockchains that are industry or vertical specific. There are some that are focused on, I know we're not really going to get into details of that, but that are higher performance or higher transaction rates, the speed at which, because they're again, it's still growing and changing and adapting as a technology. It doesn't fit every single scenario. And honestly, I see a lot of it's almost like, so I had my startup during the whole .com era. I started my first software company in '97 and sold it in January 2001. So during that period, I mean, I saw a lot of just what I thought were incredibly stupid ideas that were getting millions of dollars of funding. Just amazing to me.
Yeah. But it's happening today as well.
Yeah, and you have the same kind of things that are happening. Well, do your homework around that.
Yeah.
It seems too good to be true kind of stuff. It likely is too good to be true. But there are some exciting things that are happening. And so, yeah, do your homework around that. And just understand, if you have specific enterprise needs, specific requirements, go and take a look at, there may be projects or efforts, blockchains that are being developed to address those specific needs. So just be aware of that in your space.
And we haven't exactly talked about enterprise blockchain specifically as a term, but let's kind of look at that and say, so what are the primary hurdles, or why is blockchain, what's currently in our way to getting true acceptance of blockchain? And then in particular, is blockchain ready for prime time? And I'm going to answer that second question right away, kind of like the previous question. No. My personal belief that we're still years away from really good, like, prime time enterprise blockchain, but that does not mean we shouldn't be starting today. What do you?
Well, and I think, and I agree with that. I mean, look, it's moving a lot faster. And that's just true with technology across so many different areas. It moves a lot fast. It's not the old model where, you know, hey, 10 years from now, there'll be something. I think we'll be shocked in a year and a half, there'll be something that we thought was 5 to 7 years away, and it's done.
Yeah.
But I think that from a roadblock, especially around enterprise blockchain, is that for a lot of solutions, if you say, well, do I have to go and completely recreate this solution to do that? It's like, yes. So what's missing are a lot of the building block pieces to be able to go and move more quickly on this technology.
It's hard. Like, it's so new, very few people actually know what to do. We see the promise. The idea of a distributed ledger really does make sense, and the fact it's secure, immutable, etc. Immutable is actually a problem on the enterprise. I mean, do you really think you could have something on a large network that can't be changed? Like, that could actually be a problem where you need to be able to say, hey, I need to change that old record. I have the authority to change it. Here's why I'm changing it. And everyone would agree, yes, you're allowed to go change that. We are in its infancy still. And we don't have people who know what blockchain is. We don't have people who know how to build it. We don't have the building blocks, as you said. It's hard. But that shouldn't mean that we shouldn't touch it. It doesn't mean we shouldn't know what's going on, for sure. And it doesn't mean it's not going to still change the world, just maybe not today.
Well, and the other thing too is that if you've ever been associated with any standards bodies, you know, and like the WC3, and I was part of the Global Grid Forum at late 90s, early 2000s, and you know, those different things is that they tend to move slowly because you have a lot of people with differing requirements and needs that have to have that consensus and come together and agree on those standards. So it moves slower than what you can go do on your own, of course, but there are certain things that there has to be agreement on to move those things forward. I think for the enterprise too, is why I say that those fundamental building blocks to be able to go in and do. It's actually one of the reasons why I'm really excited about a lot of what Microsoft is doing, because I think they're addressing some of those that are prepping the technology for the enterprise. Yeah,
and they're definitely looking, and my interpretation of Microsoft is they're looking at the BASS, or blockchain as a service, and really enterprise blockchain, and really not public blockchain. They really are looking to focus on the enterprise, building what might be more private consortiums where they have, you've got a group of people who've come together and say, we're going to run this network together, but not anybody can participate in it. We only want our groups to be able to participate in it. And that makes total sense. But kind of back to the hurdle, I feel like very few people truly know the right way to do it. And so many people you have to rebuild everything. The whole thing has to be rebuilt. And if you mess up, there's going to be problems. And there's the famous one that happened a couple years ago where it was called the DAO event. And what happened is one of the first kind of smart contracts, well, not first, but it was on the Ethereum network, and this group got together and said, hey, okay, we're going to have this smart contract to be able to do this thing, and you can basically, they're going to start buying things. Well, someone figured out that there was a bug in the smart contract, because in order for the smart contract to work, on Ethereum at least, it basically has to be public. You have to be able to read what's in it because everybody needs to be able to run it. And a hacker found their mistake and don't need to go into the basics of it, but he was able to steal a lot of money, a lot of effectively of the Ether, the Ethereum coin. And it was immutable, so you couldn't undo what this person did. And there was two groups. One group said, hey, blockchain is law. If he did it, he didn't actually hack it, he just found a bug and he exploited it. He exploited the system. Tough, you guys messed up. And another group said, no, we can't allow that. And they reverted. They went back and they said, okay, everybody, we're going back a couple blocks, a lot more than a couple, and we're going to undo a whole bunch of things that happened. And it caused a whole disaster. So there's definitely big hurdles that I see with enterprise blockchain. I feel it's not quite ready, but I think there's a lot of effort being made right now to solve these answers. And for the most of us, let's watch it, let's pay attention, let's read the news. But in general, we should probably let the early adopters sort of figure out some of these problems first and not get hurt.
But I think that's also a major difference between the public, the scenario that you talked about, and doing in a private blockchain, a private network, and so where you're by going and develop that within your enterprise and within your closed circuit of partners, or maybe just internal to your company, there's less likely of that scenario happening, and that depending on what you're doing. For your enterprise solution, if it needs to be public and you're going out beyond your enterprise, then there's essentially it's a public exchange that's out there. Then you're going to open yourself up to the potential risks of that. Less so because of the nature of the technology and what it provides. But think about that. Like I used my example of the OEM and the manufacturing cycle. If it's just your company internally, if you're leveraging blockchain and building something so that you have a ledger that's accessible to anyone within your 1,000 people in your company, but it's done in a secure, transparent way, it's less, if you find a mistake or see something that's done, it's less of an impact to go back in that private.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you're talking about before, like we don't have the building blocks for a lot of that as well, and those are going to get built. And there's some people who are going to get very rich who are going to figure this out for sure. But I think the rest of us, we can utilize the building blocks and utilize the underlying technology in the foreseeable future to make some really cool things.
The other thing that they kind of hybrid. Maybe this question should have been asked earlier on, but I think that it's relevant is an organization, for those that are maybe a company has an idea for something that will be customer facing, can do it as a blockchain solution externally, and by doing the investment activities around that could actually have that new idea, that new concept, that network, that blockchain funded by the people who would then become the users of that system. Yeah. So there are some interesting ways to fund product development and some of these opportunities as well.
Yeah, the whole crowdfunding, absolutely. In interest in time, let's kind of keep moving forward. So we keep hearing about Bitcoin and all these cryptocurrencies, and they seem to hit the news every day, and they're definitely in the news right now because there's been a major crash happening over the last couple of weeks or so, and it's about the end of June 2018 during this recording. So how does this all relate, and like how do cryptocurrencies relate to enterprise blockchain? What's your 30-second kind of thought on that, Christian? I know we've been talking about it, but
and I'm like kind of to my last point, that it's where the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies, they're leveraging. You've said it a couple times that they're a blockchain that's like I make that distinction of they leverage the blockchain technology for those things. They are not the blockchain itself. Blockchain being the infrastructure, the technology, and Bitcoin, these other cryptocurrencies being a use of that technology to go and But again, I would say that for the enterprise, being able to go in and leverage those things, if you are, you can use the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies by having, if there are transaction costs like within that network. And I always refer, in an enterprise, you refer to as the funny money that needs to be shared between, hey, me and my team and my division are leasing the floor space of our 20 employees back to the company so that I got my little cost center and kind of, things around that. Well, you can build a system like that that is using these coins, these tokens for those transactions. So in enterprise, you could actually have better control over and visibility into what's happening with internal spend by setting up that kind of system as well, and having those confirmations, those acknowledgments, the smart contracts that kick off around each one of those. And so I think that space, like what does internal finance look like in the future? It's going to be based around this kind of technology.
Someone who builds that, they're going to do really well. Absolutely. I mean, and I think it's a great use of enterprise blockchain. Yeah, Bitcoin cryptocurrency is all about money transactions, really between financial transactions between two external parties, two or more parties in a public area. Enterprise blockchain is so much more. Enterprise blockchain is about more decentralized applications. They're about smart contracts. They're about a private blockchain network where you're trying to do more than just transfer money between two people. I mean, take your enterprise one where you're trying to do the internal finances, yes, but you want more than maybe just the finances. You might want still a smart contract associated with that transaction of the money between leasing out the space because you need to move money from one department to another because of internal accounting. Oh yeah, very cool stuff. Absolutely, some very fun, important stuff. Now we are like sort of more in the Microsoft space. You and I both been in that for a long time. Our companies are definitely still in that space. So a big question I always get is, well, so what's Microsoft's take on this thing? And in particular, is Microsoft involved in blockchain? Do you think they're taking it seriously? Like, what's your thoughts about Microsoft and blockchain?
Well, they've certainly been talking about it for a couple of years now. So they had a project Bletchley. I don't know where that came from. I don't know the history of that, but it was. And there's been blog posts that are out there. So I mean, it was back in late 2016 when there was a blog post around that where Microsoft kind of staked its claim, said, hey, we have this vision for, what's the quote? Vision for an open modular blockchain fabric powered by Azure and got choked up there. And highlights new elements we believe are key in enterprise blockchain architecture. And they introduced this concept of the cryptlets, which are described as these new building blocks of technology, of blockchain technology. And so if you look at some of the announcements, and Eric, you and I were both at Microsoft Build conference there, and you had a couple of the Azure blockchain team come in and present to all the MVPs and RDs in the crowd there and talk a little bit about that. It's interesting. Every one of these presentations, there's a little bit of the education, like bring people up to speed, what it is, what we're talking about before we actually talk about what they're doing, the latest stuff. But they're talking about building these infrastructure and platform as a service offerings through Azure, and that's Microsoft's approach now, which I think is brilliant. They're going and trying to make it easier for the enterprise to go and get started. So you don't have to go have a PhD in blockchain to understand what do I actually need to go and do. That they're providing tools that give your developers an environment to go and start testing and playing with it, and dramatically speed up then the development process of solutions. Yeah,
my answer to this is that they absolutely are taking it seriously. I might have complaints that I don't think their marketing department is doing a good enough job letting people know that they're doing it. I think that so Microsoft's view of this whole thing, in my opinion on it, is they're looking at the BaaS side, the blockchain as a service. So they're not trying to create the next cryptocurrency either. They don't really care about that space. They care about the enterprise. And so they're investing on the Azure side, and there was a great session.
Right place to focus too. Bravo, Microsoft.
I completely agree, absolutely. And at Build, and you can get this on YouTube, there was a session by Mark Rekovich, who's the CTO of Azure, and talk about a genius guy. I mean, his description, he had another session on how Azure is put together. Okay, anyhow, so back to blockchain. They've made a lot of investments in this. They came out with an Ethereum consortium 18 months, I think, before AWS did. Yet AWS said only in the last month or so, hey, we are doing Ethereum and Hyperledger, look at us. Yeah, Microsoft's been doing that for 18 months. Microsoft came out with something called Azure Workbench, or they just kind of call it Workbench. And as Christian was kind of alluding to there, that they're trying to help people get into blockchain development without having to worry about blockchain, really. You set up Workbench, and basically you get a whole Ethereum consortium in the back end, and you don't even have to worry about it. You don't even have to think about the fact that you have Ethereum in the back end. It just does that for you, and you now have a place to start building your code. But there's no building blocks yet. You still have to know a lot of that coding and know how to do it. But hey, this is the next good step. Microsoft has been working on something called the Coco framework, and it's an idea of building a overall blockchain service that would talk to any blockchain in a sense, and has a throughput of I think it was millions of transactions per minute. Maybe it was extremely fast. I don't think it was like 10-20,000 a second or something. Extremely fast throughput.
Yeah, I don't think it was that fast, but it was one of the fastest.
I think it was tens of thousands a second. It was what I don't remember. Maybe it's 10,000 a minute. It was hitting better than I think like Visa and MasterCard can do, which was starting to get to that database, the enterprise database throughput, which is
one of the, like I was talking about earlier. It's one of the throughput, the speed at which you can go and do those transactions. That's going to start opening up a lot of those scenarios that I was talking about.
Absolutely. So my answer is yes. I think Microsoft is taking this very seriously. It's all being done over on the Azure side. If you go to portal.azure.com, you sign up, you create a new resource. The resource groups you're looking for would be Ethereum Consortium or Workbench, which I think if you just do a Google search on Azure Workbench, you'll learn all about what Workbench is. It's some pretty cool stuff, but they're not doing like the ICO thing. They're not going out there and creating the next big public EOS or something like that, or Ethereum. They're looking to build on existing technology for the enterprise, which
I would argue that they're
good job.
Yeah, they want to have partners go and do that. I mean, that's been like the distinction that's been about Microsoft and working with partners is that, and one of the reasons I would say if you're starting to investigate, you want to get involved and understand how you can start leveraging, go become familiar with what's there today. Provide feedback on what is missing, what you need from that, because they are being very responsive. They've got dedicated team working on these aspects, and so there are a number of previews that are available on some of these things that you can get involved with. The Workbench's preview right now, but go and get involved, provide that feedback, because you're going to be on the inside track of the development of these different pieces. So if you've got specific requirements and give Microsoft scenarios, you're going to get a lot of help from them.
Exactly. They're looking for use cases. If you don't have contacts over at Microsoft, talk to Christian or I. We can help get you in contact with some of the people, I'm sure. Or if you're going to Inspire, I'm sure they'll be there. I know that there'll be the blockchain group will be at Ignite in the end of September in Orlando. So there are ways to then like publicly get involved. So when I was at Build, I went to the blockchain booth, and there was the little kiosk, and a lady came up who worked for a law firm, and she talked about the idea of using blockchain for matters, which is huge in the legal field. And I think blockchain would be a great place to be storing now enterprise blockchain in a private area, of course, maybe with heavy encryption on the content, but to be able to have an immutable form of matters that could then be easily used and consumed by by people that need it. Now, I just told you like 0.25% of everything that need to be done to make that work. And there's a lot of questions I might not be able to answer on how to do that. But the ideas are out there which are good. Go get them in front of Microsoft. They're looking to develop actual use cases, because as we go back to the other questions, nobody really knows yet everything that can be done here. We've got ideas and we've got thoughts, and people are then trying to think, how do we now do it in blockchain? But we need a lot of those ideas first. So definitely get those ideas out there. So moving on, do I need to be a developer to get started? We talked about, we've sort of answered this, I think, already. But kind of what's your take on this, Christian, on getting started?
No, you definitely, I think you definitely do need to have a developer, somebody has that background, because it's still too complex around that. There's a lot you can read, a lot you can keep up. I'm not a developer, but I'm going and monitoring these pieces. I understand a lot of it. I ask a lot of questions. And as it gets closer to the to these kind of the business application side of going and being able to build them on top of this over the next couple of years, I think that there will be an opportunity for IT pros to go in and take something that's fairly packaged, help deploy that, and then much more quickly deploy solutions within that enterprise setting. We're just not there yet. But it is, it's still very developer centric.
Exactly, and I look at it in two ways. If you've got the ideas, if you're the idea person, great. You're definitely needed in this space, but you are going to have to find somebody to help you build it, because we are years, if not longer than years, away from the Wix of building blockchain. I mean, Wix made web development basically like anybody can do it. We're not even close to that. We don't have the building blocks yet. So if you want to try to make something happen on blockchain, if you think you've got a great idea and you want to do an ICO, someone's going to have to develop that for you. Even if you're going to use Ethereum or an existing project to do it, you're going to need some talent to be able to get that solution through. So I don't want to discourage you if you're not a developer from even looking at blockchain. I still think it's worth knowing about. It's worth paying attention. But if you've got a good idea, you're going to have to go to Microsoft. You're going to have to go find some script kiddies who are getting into this space. But unfortunately, as of today, it's really complex, and there's not a huge amount of working examples yet that I have found. I mean, there's definitely great smart contracts, but nothing that I think would solve these massive enterprise ideas just yet.
I think that's going to be the next.
Yeah, so we've got a few minutes left here. Christian, you and I are definitely in this space. I know our companies are in the space of Office 365 and SharePoint. So, is this relevant at all? Like what we've been talking about blockchain, is it relevant?
Well, I think it has the potential for that. And as we talked about, I mean, there's a few vendors that are out there that have started to build solutions. There's a company, I don't know the solution, I can't vouch for it, but just what they've gone and developed, like on SharePoint, is SharePoint by Spherion. But they I saw the potential and the need there within the enterprise, and they described their capability as, for SharePoint users, using blockchain means that sharing all kinds of documents from ID cards to contracts and transactions is 100% reliable. The original registered document cannot be changed unnoticed.
Yep.
The identity of the document, the identity of the users, of the people that access that, each time it's shared and distributed further, can now be recorded and tracked.
Yep.
And so it is for those organizations where it is, the sensitive intellectual property, be able to go in and look at who's interacted, what happened, and it's all done transparently. Yep. This is, there's huge potential for this kind of technology.
And that's today, no. It's not relevant. Tomorrow, I definitely think so, and I think that there are people today who would like that technology. And I saw it there at ESBC last year. That company I think you're talking about, Christian, and it is pretty cool and sophisticated. The basic idea being, when you put a document, let's say within SharePoint, you're able to get a hash of that document. You can get a digital signature for that document, that record, whatever. That basically, if one bit is changed in that document, if anything is changed in that record, it would create a different hash, a different signature. And all you do is you take that hash and you record it on a blockchain. And the way that company did it was basically any blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, anything that can store a transaction with a piece of data. And that piece of data is basically worthless to anybody except the group that needs it, because the hash is it's a signature, it's a string of zeros and ones. But that way you can prove that document never changed. And if you start to think about if you've got SharePoint and you're combining it with Microsoft Teams and you're opening it up to external networks and you're allowing people to communicate and to share on documents, and you want to make sure that I trust that Christian, as he's storing my documents in SharePoint Online, that they're public documents or documents he and I are comfortable with sharing, but I want to make sure he didn't change it. We both want to just have trust that if we agreed to something, it didn't get changed. Blockchain can enable those kind of scenarios, and that's not for everybody, but I could definitely see some highly regulated industries, some legal industries, some financial industries where you truly want to ensure that nothing got changed and you're sharing things out in an external network. Blockchain can definitely be there, but as of today, I only know one company that's doing it within the SharePoint Office 365 space. My general recommendation to people is you don't need this today. It's just more, I really think that most of us, we just want to be paying attention, and that I think this is really going to be huge. And if you've got a great idea, you should try to investigate it, which kind of gets me to the last question, which is, so did I already miss out? Did the revolution already occur? And if it did or didn't, let's end it with, how do I get started? I've got an idea, I'm a developer, maybe I'm not. What are some useful takeaways that we can offer our audience, Christian? What are you kind of thinking here?
Well, I mean, if you're approaching this from an investment standpoint, then depending on your perspective around that, it's no, look, there's again, it's different. I'm not looking at this as like, oh, I should have gone in and invested in blockchain and that, or in Bitcoin and yeah, missed like that rise and fall. And it's like, no, look, that's not the way to go in and look at this. I mean, the technology here, it's still fairly immature. It's growing, just enormously. There've been a number of people much smarter than either of us that say, hey, this is a significant technology that rivals the creation of the internet itself in what its potential is. And whether you think that is hype or not, the issues that it can resolve around identity, around transparency, security, all of those, it's massive, a massive potential. But it is, we've got to navigate that road and be involved with that. I would say that from an enterprise perspective, because most people want it from that standpoint. They want to look at it from that. They're not going to go and they've got an idea. They don't want to go create a net new company with this idea. That's going to happen. That's out there. Tons of potential that's there. The funding of those projects. But for enterprise players, enterprise users, that's where it's going to take more time for these things to develop. But as I said earlier, there's a lot you can go and read up and learn about what's out there, what's available. And I would highly recommend, and I do this with, just about every topic here, but get involved with the dialogue that's happening. Provide the feedback. Provide, like, this is the way we're looking at it. Look, we don't care about all those other trimmings that you're working on. We need this. You need to get this right before it makes sense. I mean, provide that kind of feedback back to Microsoft and to other vendors. It's the opportunity now to be involved and be kind of at the forefront of that. So, and if you're just an individual that is a developer that wants to, or not, but wants to get involved, again, there's plenty that you can get involved in just in that dialogue.
Yeah. And my answer to this would be the blockchain revolution hasn't even occurred, I would argue. The Bitcoin cryptocurrency revolution or whatnot, that hype, yeah, that I'm going to argue you missed whatever that was, that changed. But blockchain is still in its infancy. I think that, Facebook wasn't created really until into the 2000s, yet the internet, the World Wide Web really came out back in the 95-ish time. So I argue that those multi-billion, $100 billion companies that are truly worth that and are going to change things probably haven't even, there's not a conception of them out there yet. If you want to get started from the developer's perspective, so Christian kind of gave you from more of the visionary perspective, I would argue that from the developer's perspective, my suggestion is you go over to Azure, you look at the Azure Workbench, you look at the Azure Ethereum Consortium. They're both pretty powerful. They also have a Hyperledger shell there as well. You can get started. There are some YouTube videos out there that can help you kind of get your first smart contract started. There's some books on some of the programming languages, but it's hard. Let's leave it at that. Let's start with that. It's going to be, I think, difficult to build some pretty cool, sophisticated smart contracts, but you definitely should try it. Something to think about, though, I always like to say this, is I wish it was all free, but it's not. Workbench does require a couple of VMs, and so does the Azure Consortium, the Azure Ethereum Consortium. And what I mean by that is it's going to cost money. So I found that if you left the consortium on the cheapest environment, you're looking at a couple $100 worth of Azure credits every month. Don't get me, I might be wrong, so definitely do your own investigation there. It might be thousands, it might be tens of dollars or less, but do make sure that you pay attention if you're going to go get started over on Azure. So on the developer side, though, my suggestion is kind of get started, build a Hello World smart contract and see what's out there and get your fingers wet or get your toes wet in that environment. And if you've got ideas, again, like what Christian said, talk to people, talk to Microsoft, get involved in the conversation, start to find some of the blockchain conferences and meetups that are happening around the world, around the country, for sure, because they're definitely all over the place. And I know Christian's kind of my little plug for you. I know that you're looking at kind of putting something together in Utah as well. Is that getting more public, or are you ready to share that?
Actually, yeah, the site goes live. Yeah, there's a couple things going on, but yeah, the site will go live this weekend. It's the Azure Blockchain Saturday happening here in Salt Lake City on September 8th. That's cool. So the call for speakers and sponsors goes out this weekend. We're going to follow the SharePoint Saturday model. So it's free for attendees. We're looking to have 300-400 people that are happy because we've got some fairly large both Azure and also blockchain meetups and organizations here along the Wasatch Front. Hey, we have the second lowest tech unemployment in the country here in Utah. Yeah. It's just booming. And so these are massive meetup groups that get together down in Utah Valley and Salt Lake Valleys, and so we're going to do this first event. I'm also partnering with Stefano Tempesta at Europe, who's putting together his Blockchain Saturday event that's happening in Gibraltar on September 15th. So you happen to be in the vicinity, you know.
Nice. But, US, Europe, we got you covered.
Yeah. So there's some good things coming. I think you're going to see more of these events that are going to be happening over the next year. So. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so we're basically out of time. So let me kind of do my wrap up, then I'll hand it back off to Michael here. So these are our top 10 questions that Christian and I had. Christian, thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it. This has just been a fun topic for me, and I love just being able to kind of geek out about it. I'm sure you have other questions. And Michael will give you all the lowdown on how we're going to get this recording out to you. We'll answer any additional questions in some blog posts and stuff. But Christian, thank you very much. Audience, thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it. And Michael, we'll hand it back to you.
All right. And eventually my camera will turn back on and there we go. Now I'm part of the group again. Hey everyone, like Eric said, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really great session. Thank you guys. This was a lot of fun to listen to and to learn and to hear more about this kind of a new thing that's coming out. Not new, I should say, but you know what I mean. Guys, if you have any questions, send them on over to us. Right now, there are no questions in there. So Christian and Eric, I kind of throw it back to you guys. Is there any? So we've picked 10 questions, right? I say we, and it was the two of you. If there was one question you could have included in this session that maybe got cut at the 11th hour, what question would that have been? This is less about blockchain specifically and more about this presentation, I guess, but a lot of the questions we were looking at were all really good, so I didn't want to leave any of them out.
I don't know. Go ahead.
Go ahead. All
right. I'll jump in. The one I really wanted to do more was I wanted to expand more upon the blockchain 101. I found that because I geek out on the technology side, but I axed it because it just didn't make I wanted to go through all these other questions, but I think that the way the blockchain actually works, we only gave such a quick overview of it. What are the different protocols that are used to drive the security and to drive the trust? I just think it would have been a lot of fun to go into. My little shameless plug, so ESPC happening at the end of November of 2018 in Copenhagen. I will be there doing a blockchain 101 session related to Office 365, but I will be looking at some of the more general blockchain, what are the primary pillars, etc. I think I would have liked to have been able to get into those questions more, but yeah, it was too geeky. I thought it would be better for us to deal with the enterprise blockchain questions we dealt with.
Sure, yeah, and my interest is around the ICO process and the funding aspect of that, and a lot of what's happening in the U.S. And so I'm actually doing I'll be there heckling Eric in November, but I've got a different session, but I'll definitely be participating in there in the audience. But I'm going to be doing a webinar for ESPC. We don't have the date set for this one, but I think it's going to be in mid-September. But it's on blockchain topic where I'm going to go into some of these other on the business side of those that are, because we get a lot of those questions of people that do want to go create that one-off organization, go create that, build out that idea and want to know what's involved, what does that look like, and so I'll be sharing my insights from being in the thick of it right now.
That would be really cool. The whole ICO thing is interesting for sure, and that's blockchain for sure, not enterprise. It's a different kind of enterprise blockchain. The opportunities it makes available to people, I think, is really big. It's that crowdfunding in a more secure way, in a more tradable way. I think is really, that would have been fun. Man, that's a whole hour there as well.
All right, there you go. Good. There you go. Well, with the final 6 minutes, if there's any other thoughts on this you guys want to share, you guys have been doing such a good job at informing our listeners that they haven't asked any questions. So if there's any kind of final thoughts or anything, by all means, guys, have at it. We've got a couple extra minutes here.
No, I'm good. Christian, you got anything?
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh,
Great.
thank
Always
you
great.
again.
Thank you for joining us again as well. Well, if that's the case, there's no other questions. We'll go ahead and wrap it up a little bit. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This was a really great session. Everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Next month, we're going to have the amazing Heather Newman joining us for our webinar session. Topics still to come, but keep an eye out for that. She's a wonderful human being and a great friend of PixelMill, so we're happy to have her next month. So keep an eye out for that. Again, thank you, everyone. We'll get that recording out probably by early next week, and so in case there's anything you missed, you can come back or share it with your friends. Again, Eric and Christian, thank you. If you want to find out more about PixelMill, pixelmill.com, on Twitter at PixelMillTeam, hashtag PixelMill Webinars. You can find Eric at Eric Overfield on Twitter. You can find Christian at Buckley Planet. God, I even messed up your Twitter handle. Sorry about that. Or he's also in charge of CollabTalk. You can check them out. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we will see you guys next month.
Bye, all.
Thanks a lot. Bye.